It'll be, an update session without a group.
Yeah.
Or without quorum. So just a couple of new business items and updates. We already introduced Ashley. And then the appointment to RCAP, as you mentioned that with Caitlin as well. We chatted a little bit about the fact that on the town board's agenda this coming Monday, the 12th, the board has an item on their regular meeting agenda to consider an appointment to serve on the Recycling and Conservation Advisory Board for Boulder County. It's a position that hasn't had an elected official in it from Superior in the past. It's been a staff member, my position, for the better part of several years that I'm familiar with. So Trustee Hansen will be considered for appointment to that group. This is a position or a group that I've mentioned to this committee in the past, and there hasn't been a committee member who was available at that time to serve as the town's representative. So Trustee Hansen is going to try and step in our stead to serve as the town's representative, which will be great. I don't know if he'll have a role with this committee, so I'll get in touch with him about stuff that's going on or any kind of information that might make sense. And I imagine he might come to some of the meetings. And as you said, you chatted with him a little bit about potentially serving as a liaison depending on start time and his schedule.
Yeah, he said he's really interested in doing both the countywide and town Superior recycling conservation groups. And so he'd love to be a liaison for us, but the current start time is too early for him to attend. So he had contacted me to see if there might be opportunities for us to consider pushing it back a bit so that he could attend. So I think at this point we'll probably just send an email and get people's thoughts that way, and see if it would be easier or worse, or certainly given the number of openings we have on RCAC, we can't afford to lose anyone. So yeah. So I'd be happy to send out that email after this is over and see what people's thoughts are.
Okay, great. Let me just write myself a note. So that was it for kind of the side items. The newsletter this month has a lot of the regular items that we've talked about in the past, so I'll just skim through them. Trails Day was last Saturday. Parties in the Park is this coming Saturday. When you saw your newsletter, if you wondered what that was. Oh, I see a hand.
Yeah. So for both I know the Rock Creek HOA is doing the movies, but the Parties in the Park, are we going to have like recycling bins available in addition to trash, or is that something like we can coordinate on? That like if there's a big group event that we're like, since we don't have town recycling bins, if we have event available ones.
These are being hosted by, I believe it's the
CAPS is
the Cultural Arts and Public Spaces Advisory Committee, and they're coordinating it on their own. There isn't any staff oversight. They're doing this on their own, and they're having this at parks, Wildflower Park, Community Park, and Founders Park. I think all have recycling, landfill, and compost cans. Those are the three. That's right. And I think North Pool and South Pool I know have recycling. Okay. And Purple Park too. I'm thinking about Purple Park. So there will be recycling and hopefully compost at the majority of those sites where those are being hosted. But I think this is more of a neighborhood party. The town, this committee has advocated for EcoCycle's zero waste event participation at official town events in the past. And part of the budget that's associated with this group and the recommendation to the board in the past has been to go to pay for that at town events. But these are more informal neighborhood events.
Okay.
Cool.
Sounds good.
So that's this Saturday. And then July 4th, I had circled because I wanted to remind Essie that you had said you might be a maybe for going on July 4th.
Sure, yeah. Remind me what the times are again?
9 to noon. So the parade's at 8:30.
Okay.
And then they're set up by it's in the ball field area at Community Park.
Yeah.
And the floats end usually around 9-ish, and that's when the pancakes start flipping.
Okay.
And usually, depending on how hot it is, sometimes it'll be done a little before noon if it gets warm.
Yeah, that should work. So I'm happy to do that.
Okay. I'll put you down as yes, and then I'll
put that in my
I'll leave a note I'll put a note in the meeting notes, see if there's anybody else. And Essie, I think if I remember correctly, you went to Chili Fest last year. It's pretty much the same thing, except not in the parking lot. You know,
Okay.
So the box of stuff, and then the banner, and then Katie Rummel with Parks, Rec, and Open Space Department will coordinate kind of where the booths are. So it might be the situation where you were squished in with somebody, and you might have a little elbow room. I'm not sure how many booths they're going to have.
Okay.
For the 4th of July usually has a little bit more space because it's on the ball fields. So I'll put you down as a yes, and if your schedule changes, let me know.
Okay, thanks, we'll do.
Transit updates. So the ongoing transit availability info is listed every month now. The ridership, just as an FYI, somebody asked about it a couple of months ago, and we got another update. And the ridership is back up over 3 boardings per hour, which is, like I've mentioned in the past, that threshold for having call-and ride service typically retained by RTD. Yeah, you're right, Essie. It does say three vacancies.
Okay.
It's really officially 2.
Possibly 3,
Possibly
depending.
3. And then
Okay.
there's a link in the newsletter to this great poster. There was a 7th grader at El Dorado Cade who submitted a poster submittal as part of the Indoor Air Quality Household Hazardous Waste Education Project through the school district that Melissa in our department was able to recreate and include in our newsletter, which was great this month. Brunelleschi's is open if you haven't been over to the sports stable. The restaurant's open. Been there twice. Pizza's good. And
Cool. I'll have to go check it out.
one of the it's an ahi tuna salad, but they had a funny name for it. Not a funny name, but a unique name.
Excited to have more dining options.
Yeah, seriously,
close to
that'd be
home.
great.
Yard waste site. So Parks, Rec, and Open Space Department has coordinated the construction that you heard about over the last few months, and I've given you some updates. So they had the official finish and grand opening. If you haven't been over there, it's
Fantastic.
great. It really is great to be able to drive in and drive through rather than back in and wait in line and hope you can squeeze your way out. So that's been great. So the group's familiar with that project. And then last month I was remiss, and I don't think I included the do-gooder video in the newsletter. If you haven't had a chance to look at this, that's why you recognize Ashley's face. You know, she's in the video, and she let me know right before this meeting that somebody walked up to her.
I was recognized.
You're the do-good lady.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome.
I love the dog poop videos.
That's awesome.
There's worse things probably to be associated with.
No.
Yeah. That's awesome. So that was in there. Bike to Work Day is coming up. This is a great regional program, and the town's been a part of this for many years. June 28th into the month. Paint. We've talked in the past about the statewide paint care program, and there was a marketing piece or a press release that came out, and we were able to include that in this month's newsletter. And the Clean Air Challenge. This is the lawnmower exchange program. There was one last date, the first week of August, if I remember, or first week of June, that we were able to include again in this month's newsletter. So several sustainability related items in our regular monthly newsletter items, and then our ongoing, the yard waste site, trash on windy days, bulk item, and then our ongoing do good, not the video. Sorry, Ashley. And then household hazardous waste, the usual. So newsletter items, and then July 4th, and then Chili Fest was the other event item that I'm sure there was a save the date in here somewhere. But those were the newsletter items this month. And then next month, or I'll try to remember to include a note in the meeting notes, letting other members of the committee know if they're available to attend Chili Fest. I'll be sure to remind you next month.
Sounds good.
Next was the committee appointment schedule. The town board considers annual appointments. Each position on a committee is on a 3-year term, and you all both filled terms they weren't net new terms, but every 3 years, or every year, a third of each group is renewed. And Colleen and Kim's position were up for renewal this month. You know, the terms go through June. Colleen is interested in being reappointed, so if you saw the agenda, there's a consideration by the board for reappointing her to a full 3-year term rather than the partial term that I think she filled previously. You noticed in that list that Kim wasn't listed as potentially being reappointed. She's not interested in being reappointed. She's had a job change, and that's one of the reasons she hasn't been able to make the last few months. So she said probably it would make sense for her to step down from her position at this time. So on Monday night, the 12th, the board will consider those committee reappointments and the appointments. And I'll let you know next month. Budget schedule. Budget schedule was the other item, and that's a discussion item on this as well. I guess I put it in here 2 places. I like it so much, I listed it.
Budgets are fun.
I'm thinking of the schedule item. So next week, each of the departments were submitting each of our departmental and operating budgets and capital budgets to the internal budget review committee starting next week. So it's like I've told you in the past, it's an ongoing year-long process to focus on budgets and start thinking about what's going to be in this year's budget versus next year's budget. So we're actually making our submittals next month, and that's why we had this as a recommendation item on the agenda, and we've been talking about it the last 3 meetings because it's a milestone item on all of our work plans to make sure that we have each of the committees have a chance to opine and really share what they're interested in making as budget recommendations. And then you've heard me in the past just talk about all the meeting dates, the finance committee meeting dates. I let you all know about if anybody's interested. Feel free to come hang out and go through spreadsheets with us. There are always a few people who want to come down. It's great to have the participation. So we don't need to spend too much time on that, but just the milestone date is that it's due this month, and then over the next 2 or 3 months, next 2 months really, we'll be going through an internal budget review, and then usually in August or September, the board receives the recommended preliminary balanced budget, and then they'll consider it usually in the fall, kind of October, November timeframe. And it has to be approved by the end of the year. Anything else? News, updates, new business? Let's see if I missed anything. I had a note last month, Caitlin, that you asked about how many gardens in a box were sold not as part of the town's coupon for the 50, and I didn't hear back.
Okay.
I didn't ask soon enough.
That's okay.
And the folks that were helping me find that data aren't in town right now. So I
Yeah, I think it would just be interesting to see like the number of vouchers we had and then the number of people in Superior who got them. So just kind of see what the delta is there.
If you saw the CRC's, they had a marketing piece come out today, and I think I saw in there that 4,000 were sold.
Wow.
Total.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's for the whole year or just in this last spring garden in a box sale, but I'm going to assume there were more than just the
And I saw that they also do a fall garden in a box. Do we do vouchers for that?
We haven't in the past. We haven't participated in it.
Okay.
Something we
Be
could.
cool.
Yeah, we
Yeah.
have some budget flexibility. That would be something to include as a potential budget
Yeah.
add.
Do you know if those are like perennials then? I would
Yeah.
hope
I'm like,
so.
what do you plant in the fall?
Yeah.
Hopefully. Yeah, bulbs.
That's true.
It
Yeah,
could
I
be
do
a bunch
bulbs.
of bulbs.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would
Bulbs
have
in
to
the
be
box.
perennials and bulbs, right?
Yeah. Yeah, so I think it would just be interesting to see that. And
Yeah, be cool.
So yeah, dipping our toe back in the Garden in a Box program this year was great. It was a recommendation that came from this group last year for this year's budget. It'd be great to maybe expand that and and be more of a participant going forward. So I'll have that as a profession item. So debriefing the May 22nd dinner session, and then also the presentation for the sustainability options for commercial builders. Essie, thanks again for making the time to go. And
Yeah,
I
my
was
pleasure.
filling in for the town manager that night, and the computer that the town clerk uses to bring stuff up on the screen had a meltdown, and
Oh, no.
Essie just got to talk about the presentation
Yep.
slides.
All the slides.
While we all
Oh,
were
wow.
looking at them. So we got to look at them.
Mhm.
So it was, I appreciate you being flexible and
Oh,
just
yeah,
kind
no
of
problem.
talking through it rather than having it up on the screen,
Mhm.
which was great.
good work.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, fortunately I printed out notes, so that was definitely a lifesaver.
Yeah.
It was either
Always
that
be
or you take my
prepared.
iPad. You know,
That's
we
true,
would-
that would've
we
worked as well,
We would have
yeah.
found something for you.
Yeah, no problem.
So I don't know if it makes sense to maybe wait till next month, or if there were any action items, or if there was anything you wanted to catch Caitlin up on specifically.
Yeah, I mean, I think overall it was pretty well received by the board, and mostly kind of one of the interesting things that came up both in the dinner and the presentation was just that they're not really aware of any like concrete goals towards sustainability or energy efficiency or anything like that, and so it's kind of like from their viewpoint they're trying to figure out a little bit like what level of participation makes sense. So it's one of the reasons I was curious if they're actually considering joining the Paris Agreement thing, because then we could have something concrete to help them work towards, which might be really helpful. So I think that'd be great. Otherwise, I think it might be worth us just kind of looking around to see what guidelines the town has or goals around sustainability, and see if maybe it makes sense for us to kind of help them, craft a more stringent goal that we could actively help them work towards.
Yeah.
As opposed to just like, we want to be sustainable and green.
It sounded during the dinner like, having more of like a concrete focus on like, to us, sustainability means these like things, and we want to focus. It sounded, everybody seemed behind solar energy.
Yeah, exactly.
And things like that. And so finding those areas of common interest among the board, but also I do agree that like having kind of an overarching vision or goal of like, here's what we're moving towards, gives us a little bit more room to say like, in order to achieve that, here's what we recommend.
Right, exactly.
Because right now it's like, we want to be sustainable, we want to recycle.
Right. I think it'll help make communication between RCAC and the board a little bit clearer as well, in terms of how exactly we can really help them meet their goals and make sure that we're providing value, but also, not just spinning our wheels, coming up with all sorts of stuff that isn't really feasible or in the board's interest to do. So I think from that perspective, having a clear goal would be super valuable and helpful. So we'll see what the rest of the RCAC group thinks as well.
Yeah.
But
I second the motion.
Excellent. Okay, cool. Well, it's a sweep.
So I'm going to jump in there.
Sure.
The dialogue that we had during the dinner about whether or not there was a diversion goal, and Michelle's recollection. She remembered the goal, and the town board very specifically approved a 50% diversion goal in 2002. There's nothing ambiguous about it. I've had a chance to go through the meeting notes and look back at what the group was working on then. And it's a lot of the projects and programs that you see in the work plan that were really the genesis for this group being impaneled, whether that was yard waste side or irrigation audits, or being part of the town event cycle, having a household hazardous waste. All of those items really came out of some of that initial goal establishment from what used to be called the Waste Diversion Advisory Committee. So the diversion goal itself, there's nothing ambiguous about it. The needle stopped moving. I don't want to say the needle stopped moving, but the real policy direction, just skimming through the minutes that the committee was interested in, was to make a bigger dent to get away from the kind of 20-ish to 25% diversion rate that we were at then, and we're probably about the same now in terms of trash to recyclables, was to get curbside compost, which was it's been a focus during the 2 trash contract dialogues that this group's been a part of, or that I can recall the details of, that this group worked with me on 2 years ago. That was a big element of the discussion at the time, was if we want to get to 50% diversion goal, there needs to be curbside compost. And I just reading that again, thinking about our experience over the last decade, it's really still kind of the conversation. There's some incremental areas that the town has made great progress in, but to get toward a 50% diversion goal is going to take some detailed data tracking and monitoring, and then at some point, Jim's not here tonight, but the HOA at some point might introduce compost pickup as a required element. But right now, it's an elective service, like we talked about during the dinner.
Right, absolutely.
And I think I don't remember the numbers that Jim has told us in the past about how many participate from Rock Creek.
Very few.
Mhm.
So the
just to
economics
be-
just haven't worked out for the
Yeah,
most part.
absolutely.
So, the town has sustainability as a plank for our decision-making and our budget-making on a
Mhm.
staff level, and it's been
Okay.
a very specific direction from the board in the past to continue to invest in all the programs that you're familiar with,
Mhm.
and you've
Absolutely.
heard me tell you about in the past, that a lot of these came out of this group's work,
Mhm.
whether it was getting involved in recycling or having a Christmas tree pickup or having the trash contract have a required recycling element. Those really came through this group. But the notion of what particular policy items to have this group really sink your teeth into,
Mhm.
I guess that's maybe the next kind of item to identify.
Yeah, and to be clear too, I recognize that we have a pretty strong waste diversion goal, which is great, and that's specific. I think for my perspective, there might be value in having more of a either broader carbon or energy efficiency goal or something along those lines in addition
Mhm.
to the waste diversion goal. And that if we kind of look at, having clear goals for what we're hoping to achieve, then I think it'd make it much easier for our group to come up with solid recommendations for the board to consider as well to help them directly meet their goals, as opposed to just kind of coming up with stuff that may or may not be of interest that we think is cool, which is fantastic. Like, I'm certainly happy with all the work we've done so far, but I think we could be even more directly valuable to the town if we were kind of helping them work towards a clear goal, potentially. So both waste diversion and some other sort of energy-related goal as well, I guess.
Mhm.
Or water too could be a focus. So, yeah, that's kind of my thought at the moment.
Yeah, they're always good dialogues to have.
Yeah.
And with budget season coming up, this is the time when policy decisions are made through what projects and programs
Mhm.
are budgeted for, in the
Absolutely.
coming calendar year. So it's always a good time to talk about this stuff and what the committee sees your work focusing on over the next year or 5 years and what the board's going to include in their annual operating budget and 5-year capital plan. So
Mhm.
it's always a good time to talk about it.
Cool. Sounds good.
The next opportunity, aside from being part of the budget dialogue,
Mhm.
like you heard the mayor say, we'll have to schedule some time to come back and think more about the sustainability options for commercial builders. He wanted
Mhm.
to have that as a future item, either at a retreat or a work session.
Yeah.
It probably makes sense at a work session because the retreats are usually have been during the day.
Mhm.
So I'm trying to work around folks' schedule.
Absolutely.
It might make sense to try and get on a work session schedule or agenda at some point. I just don't know when that'll be.
Yeah, do you know what the next steps are for us in order just to make sure that we're engaged and taking advantage of opportunities that may arise? Or is there kind of a role for RCAC to play, or is it kind of something that the board just needs to do themselves? I'm not really sure what the process there is.
I guess in the interim, until the board has had a chance to define or at least receive some additional information, either from staff or from the committee in terms of recommendations,
Mhm.
there aren't really real concrete steps.
That's kind of the impression I got, but
The,
I'll confirm.
the development process itself, like you've heard me in the past, when there's an active application that's coming to the board, I'll let you guys know about it.
Right.
And you have a chance to
Absolutely.
make comment on it or to make a recommendation regarding any project. So if there was a commercial
Mhm.
project that was going to go to the planning commission and the town board as a final development plan, I'd let you know.
Okay,
There
perfect.
isn't one coming up.
Right.
Like we've talked about in the past, the value of the commercial sustainability measures are it's a great option for the board to include in their dialogue with any developer that comes forward.
Mhm.
So it's available now if the board's interested. If there were an item that could come up,
Mhm.
there could be Essie or another member of the committee could come and share it during
Sure.
that public hearing. Just remind the board as a part of that development plan hearing, that public hearing, to consider that plan, where the
Mhm.
committee's coming from, and ask if the board would want to hear about some of the sustainability-related items with the development project.
Okay.
And you heard the board mention the Element Hotel
Mhm.
has a real focus, just as a part of their corporate culture,
Yeah.
and using sustainable products and having sustainable
They
practices.
could be
in
our
water.
first good business award
Yeah, exactly.
recipient.
That would be excellent. By default.
Yeah.
No,
Well,
I
it's
mean,
not-
I know there's also like the ice skating rink has done a lot of efficiency stuff. I know in terms of trying to improve that, and I know that a lot of the new buildings as well are doing similar things, which is awesome. So, and I know that the Mayor Pro Tem Sandy Pennington suggested that we continue to be kind of obnoxious isn't the right word, but persistent, I guess, in terms of bringing it up. So I just kind of wanted to get your thoughts on what the best avenue is to be persistent but not obnoxious, hopefully.
Boy, persistent but not obnoxious. I'm not sure.
A little
I'm
bit of
qualified.
obnoxious is okay.
Fine one.
And on the obnoxious side.
I'm happy to be obnoxious if necessary, but I just don't want to go overboard.
Well, I guess if there was a policy option or a policy discussion that is on the agenda, I'd be glad to talk to you guys or give you a heads up.
Okay.
You guys still get the agendas from Phyllis? So you guys see what's
Yeah.
on the agendas coming up.
Yeah, and so I'm going to attend the Monday meeting, for example, to remind them that we're happy to help them if they do decide to go forward with the Paris Agreement. That we'd be happy to support them in that, and figure out how we can best serve their needs.
Yeah,
so
that'd be
that's
great.
that's my
a
plan.
perfect-
But
That's a perfect example. And it's
Okay.
just convenient that the meeting agenda was posted yesterday or Tuesday, and then we had a meeting so we could talk about it. But if anybody
Yep.
ever has a question, just feel free to call or email me.
Okay.
And hey, would it make sense to think about this? Because I get stuck in the minutia of the agenda and all the items that are in it,
Yeah.
in those meeting materials, and sometimes I don't really stop and think, hey, would it make sense to have some feedback? So yeah, if you ever have a question or see something where you're like, oh, maybe it would make sense, just give me a call or ask or email me.
okay, sounds good. Thanks.
Yeah, it's a good idea.
Cool.
So yeah, the debrief, I'm not, I thought it went well. I appreciate you guys making the time. And the
I
board's
liked one
dialogue.
suggestion, I don't remember who, it might have been Sandy, but like liaising more with Rock Creek Magazine. Because I know I get that every month, and there's
Yeah, same
always
here.
interesting articles. But I have
That'd be good. I
seen
hadn't heard that.
if we had, if we could maybe do something in there. I don't know, Martin, if you are in contact with the people who put that on?
No.
Okay. Well, I'll find my last copy. But if we think of something that if we wanted to put out an article on sustainability tips or composting your lawn clippings and letting people know about available resources or something like that, that maybe we could do something this summer.
Sure, that'd be great. If you have your most recent.
Sorry, I'm trying to add this to my phone so I can remind us to follow up. It keeps replacing all the words with things that are definitely not what I wanted to say.
Not about recycling.
Market living, Marcy
Yeah,
Field.
yeah. I'll check because I know there's something in there interested in sharing an article or something. So I'll check on that and send
Cool,
it out
that'd be
to you
fantastic.
guys.
Thank you.
Yeah, that would be great. And if there's something that the group is interested in or somebody wants to author or take ownership of, to put either in the Rock Creek Living, we'll also put it in the newsletter. We've had information in the newsletter in the past about holiday shopping guidelines, and we've had we put a compost article in last year that a member of the committee assembled. So it's a thing that this group has traditionally been involved in. I think it's on the work plan is to consider items to include in the newsletter, because I get stuck on the things that I get like the e-blasts about or
Yeah.
just our ongoing programs. When you guys have a chance to step back a little bit and think here might be a topic that would be good to include, and then have the time and energy to assemble something, that'd be great. Whenever you
Cool.
have some.
Okay. I think that'd be great. One of the other things too that I was just going to mention to you, because I think you left for after dinner, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Yeah. So I can't unfortunately remember which trustee it was, but there was some discussion after my presentation about whether it might be possible for Superior to become kind of like a example or one of the greenest small towns in the U.S. or something like that. So I was heartened to hear that. I thought that was really cool.
I saw
So-
in Fast Company magazine last month, I think it was their most innovative, and it was a small town in Texas, and I will look up which one it was. It's done all kinds of sustainability stuff.
That's cool.
And been recognized for all the efforts they're making. So that could be something we
We
shoot
compete
for.
with Texas, excellent.
Yeah. Next year they'll put us in there.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. Cool. Does it make sense to discuss the budget at all, or given that there's only two of us and we've kind of looked at it?
I'm going to include the items that we've talked about in the past. So I'm going to
Right.
assume over the last 3 meetings when we've talked about this, hopefully everybody's had a chance to hear, except maybe Tanya hasn't been at any of the
Mhm.
last 3. So hopefully everybody's had a chance to at least hear my phone close to the microphone. Yeah, maybe. So the ongoing items that we've talked about in the past that are identified in your work plan.
Mhm.
Last year, the recommendations list was tweaked, I think, a little bit. I don't remember if Michelle wanted to include the bulk item pickup, and that was included as part of a general recommendation from this committee.
Mhm.
So I guess if I can just maybe summarize what was in last year's for this year's budget. The list that we've talked about, I think last month or the month before last, were the newer programs and whether or not to continue them. The dog waste compost program at Autry Park, the education, which was great to do last year, purchasing outreach materials to distribute at the community events, the recyclable or the canvas bags that
Mhm.
you've handed out have been great.
Those are
So
great.
continuing to do that and continuing to use some of the operating budget for that made sense to this group. And then exploring options to coordinate with the HOA to host a bulk item pickup event, which is at least partially funded by participants. I think Michelle has been a real champion of including that in the last couple of budgets, but I think, like I mentioned, after the budget's been approved, the board did not include that.
Mhm.
It hasn't been included for maybe 4 years now. And then contract staff resources to help coordinate and promote conservation-related programs and activities in the community has been great. Having Sharon help us over the last year, and then Ashley making some time tonight, and hopefully going forward to be able to provide some of that follow-up and logistical support for some of these programs and initiatives, which are great, but it is more than just passing through information in the role that I typically am able to handle
Mhm.
through our newsletter. So those were the items from last year's recommendation. If there were any other items, I hadn't heard any come up from the group. Essie, have you heard from any, did anybody contact you and let you know they had any particular
I haven't heard any
item?
additional items
So
from
I'm
anyone.
going to go ahead, if you guys are okay with it, I'm just going to include the items that we've had over the last year. I'm going to basically kind of roll over to this year with a note maybe about expanding the Garden in a
I
Box
was gonna say,
program.
does that fall under the Zurich landscape? And also,
Yes.
I think at the first meeting that I was at, we had talked about like those canvas bags, also thinking about like maybe doing the dog bag
Oh, yeah.
leash
Yeah, that's right.
thing.
Mhm.
So
OSAC got the dog bone shaped.
yeah, that go like
leash
on your
bags.
dog's collar, the leash.
Nice.
Yeah, maybe having those in the bag.
Yeah.
Or maybe co-locate with OSAC at Chili Fest on July
Mhm.
4th.
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be
That's
great.
what to do. So yeah, we could have some budget flexibility to buy some of those if they
Okay.
run out.
Okay.
And I know you had in the cover memo mentioned potentially looking at additional staffing for some sort of sustainability role. Is that?
That
is
is, so
going
yeah,
in
you're
here,
right. I
or-
did include that. Thanks for reminding me.
Sure,
The,
because that'd be great too. Make sure it gets in the final draft.
As I was working on that cover memo, I was thinking to myself, wouldn't it be nice to have somebody to help me with this cover memo? Because it was about 9:30
It's
at
a
night.
chicken and egg problem.
Part and parcel of the discussion in 2002 and 2003, as I was
Mhm.
flipping through those minutes, was identifying staff time and resources to help operationalize some of the projects and programs that the group was interested in then. And that's been, I want to call it a theme through this committee's existence over the last 15, 18 years, has been to identify programs to start and programs to look at, whether they were sustainability programs or preservation programs or
Mhm.
water or wastewater energy. The ability to provide follow-through is typically fallen on contractors or outside organizations or partnering with Boulder County
Mhm.
on PACE or some other programs. If the town wanted to do something that required more support and ownership at a staff level, it would require an additional staff member, or identifying a portion of an FTE that we currently have that would be dedicated to that. And we currently don't have that, as you've heard me
Mhm.
come on, maybe whine about over the months in the meetings.
Okay.
So that would be an opportunity if the committee was interested in considering a recommendation. So here it says contract staff resources to coordinate. If you were interested in saying add, or, you know, I could look at maybe a previous recommendation where it might have said actually just add staff resources, whatever that looked like, whether that was contract staff or regular staff.
I think that'd be good. I think that's kind of one of the challenges that we've, you know, faced in looking at different options in the past. Is just that there's lots of stuff we could do, but, you know, if there's limited town resources, then it makes it difficult. So I think I'd be happy with that recommendation.
Caitlin, if that makes sense to you, maybe I'll include that as a part of the recommendation, and then when the group sees it in the meeting notes, I'll just ask if anybody has.
Sure.
Well, we'll maybe just highlight it and say next month during the July meeting, we can talk about it more. Because as you know, the budget process takes a few months. So if it makes sense to take something out or add something in, there's always an opportunity to do that. But it's a fairly narrow time frame, and the budget impacts of any changes, they ripple through the mini spreadsheets. So it's not, once we make that submittal, that's our submittal.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
So
No rippling.
well, it's possible, and it happens, but
It's just
not
challenging at that point.
Yeah, it's not just,
Yeah.
oh, hey, Martin just called us with an
Desirable to
idea, let's just
avoid.
change
Right.
this.
Yeah.
The budget process is very deliberate and thorough, and making a recommendation for a change, we're glad to incorporate that as part of the discussion for the board and the finance committee, and now's an opportunity to do that.
Cool. I also noticed the current budget thing that we're looking at discusses the IECC and upgrading to the next level, but it looks like we're just talking about discussing it rather than requesting additional funds to support that. Is that something that we should
That's
consider
last
as
year.
well?
Yeah.
Oh, last year, okay.
Yeah,
Right.
that's last year, so.
Right, okay, sorry.
That was I guess this is kind of a debrief item following the dinner from last year. I think the group talked with the board then about whether or not the board was interested in having the committee continue to work on that. I think that was one of the next items was what a timeline would look like. See, there you go.
Excellent.
The wheels of government moving forward, right there.
1 year at a time.
Grinding slowly forward inexorably.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that might be a good thing to include as well in budgetary request as additional funds. I'm not sure exactly how much money would be required by the town to adopt the next IECC, but setting aside some funds to do that.
Well, we talked a little bit last month, and then also with the board during the meeting about how we have scheduled to adopt the new building code and the new IECC
Right, okay.
every 3 years on that staggered pattern.
Right.
And this would be the year, and I think I let you know, maybe
That's
not,
right, I
aside
forgot
from
you
the
had mentioned
meeting, as
that.
kind of a side note, maybe we weren't on camera during the meeting, that it's on our work plan this year to try and
Perfect.
get to that.
Okay, excellent.
I just don't know when.
No, that's fine. I just want to make sure that was something that
So that would
continues
need
to
to be
march
something-
forward.
Yeah, so any training associated with that, or any documentation enhancements, the things that are associated with the IECC, we would need to identify in our current budget. When the board, if and when the board approves that this year, or whenever they do at their
Sure.
discretion.
Okay.
So that's something that staff will be tasked with. So the
Gotcha.
policy recommendation from the committee is to go ahead with it, and then once the board does it, then it's on staff to make sure it happens.
Okay, makes sense. Thanks.
So this is last June.
Yeah, so I think apart from those things, everything else seems good, including the potential for looking at the fall garden box thing, or expanding just the spring one.
Yeah, or for 2018, maybe considering both if
Yeah.
possible.
Mhm.
So.
Do you know when my 1-year term is up, or when I get reevaluated? I just realized I have no idea how long I've been on here for.
I would be glad to go over it with you. This is one of the spreadsheets that I spend some time in.
Mhm.
Oh, maybe not. Oh, look, let's see, I have it open now.
Oh, there you go.
He's in it so much, he's already in it.
I see you were appointed on August 2 years ago, so your term is up in 2018.
Okay, cool.
So I always do a poor job of explaining the 3-year stagger, but 17, 18, and 19. There are 3 vacancies, or 3 positions are up for potential reappointment every year.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Well, that's kind of what I thought. I just wasn't sure which cycle I was on, so.
So you're next year.
All right.
Caitlin, you are through 2019.
Yeah. So Joe, Kim, and Colleen are the ones that are up this time.
Well, Joe and Kim are highlighted in yellow.
Yeah.
So it's my secret reminder when I look at this that they stepped down.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else on the agenda or anything else that anyone wants to
That's pretty
bring
much
up?
it.
Okay.
So those are the items I had. There were, obviously there were a lot of things that were discussed during the dinner, and then some follow-up
Mhm.
items during the presentation that might make sense. Obviously now's the time we can chat about them if you want to chat with me about them or with each other, but it might make sense to maybe wait till next month.
That's kind of my
Timeline-wise, we
feeling.
talked about if something does come up that's associated with commercial development, I'll be sure and give you guys a heads up, so
Cool.
you can provide comment through the public hearing process and make recommendations
Thanks.
to the board. And then in terms of next steps for some of the items that were discussed during the dinner meeting, it was a pretty broad discussion. You touched on some of the items. I didn't really think there was anything that you had to discuss maybe right now.
Mhm.
But if there was something you had questions about, obviously give me a call.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks.
So even with 2 members, we still stretched this to almost an hour.
Woohoo, or something.
Well, like 40 minutes
Yeah,
Okay,
of
so
meeting.
yeah, we didn't start
Yeah,
till
exactly.
5:45.
Yeah. Okay, so next meeting is July 13th.
July 13th, so
Mhm.
yeah, right in the middle of vacations.
I'll be here.
You'll be here?
I'll be here. Yay.
Ashley, you'll be here? Okay.
Cool.
My kids are here around school.
Oh, you're so lucky.
Aw.
Parent. So I didn't really have anything else. I don't want to keep you, if you had something you
Okay.
wanted to chat
No,
about.
I
you
don't
wanna
have
delve
anything
with.
else. Cool.
Okay.
I
Thanks,
appreciate
everyone.
you guys making the time as always.
Yeah.
I know that it isn't
Let
always
us know.
convenient.